What is up, everyone? Welcome to There Can Only Be One, the podcast that puts together the all-star best of your favorite singers and bands. And today, we got a good one. We got a good one on this show because we are talking about 2019 Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inductees, the one and only Def Leppard. And here to join me and go down Def Leppard Road, Lyle Robichaud from 640 AM Toronto. Lyle, welcome to the show. How you doing, man?
Doing great, Jason. Doing great as always. Can't not wait to talk some music. Can't wait to get into one of the bands that really kind of shaped my tastes when I was a youngling.
Now, for those of you who do listen to my other show, It's Not That Bad, you have heard Lyle before on a few episodes here, but now we get to talk music. So I'm going to ask you this. When you were coming up with bands to discuss, what is it about Def Leppard that made you want to, kind of put them up there?
Well, the reason being is like where I grew up back out east in New Brunswick, Canada. Of course, I was raised on country music, but specifically very old country music. My grandfather was actually a member of the George Jones fan club, so I was raised on very sad, very old music. I didn't really get the music bug until I was a teenager because I never really identified with old country. AC/DC's Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction ceremony I saw that on TV live, and that kind of opened up the door for me. The first two bands I really hooked onto as a kid were Def Leppard and AC/DC. AC/DC, unfortunately, has already been taken, so naturally it fell to my second choice, which was Def Leppard.
I love the fact that we're now at this point, we're like, oh, this band's already taken. So clearly we've been around long enough that people's favorite bands are already off the list. But Def Leppard, wholeheartedly agree. Absolutely love them. They were the sound of the 80s. They were the sound of the early 90s. And they're still the sound of today if you're still listening to new music that's being released. But let us explain what we are about to do here. We are about to go through 14 studio albums from Def Leppard's discography. As always, we are not going to be touching any live albums or compilations, which means we are not doing albums like Vault or Mirrorball. But I want to give a quick shout out here to Hulk Patriot, who chimed in over on X and picked Undefeated off of Mirrorball. We're not going to be covering that album, but thank you, Hulk Patriot, for joining in on this one here. We will be skipping the Def Leppard EP, which was released before On Through the Night, because the three songs that are on that album were eventually released or re-recorded for other albums. So those songs, while we're not touching that EP, we will be able to cover those songs, or at least the albums that those songs eventually appeared on. But we're going to go back. I can't believe I'm saying this here. We're going to go back 43 years to On Through the Night, released March 14th, 1980. The band at this point is Joe Elliott on vocals, Steve Clark and Pete Willis on guitar, Rick Savage on bass, and Rick Allen on drums. The album hit number 15 in the UK and number 51 in the US. It is platinum in the US and in Canada. There were three singles off of this one. Hello America was the highest charting single, which hit number 45 in the UK. Now, we had some chime-ins over on Facebook and on X, so I want to make sure that they all get their shout-outs throughout the show here. Mark Claddy went with Rock Brigade, Cactus Pete chose Hello America, and both Hulk Patriot and Jeff Rusinellos chose Wasted. But now, Lyle, the ball's in your court. Off of On Through the Night, what did you go with?
I went with Satellite, actually, which I'm very amazed that nobody picked, Jason.
What is it about Satellite?
I've always, when it comes to Def Leppard, I think sometimes their best work is done when it's a little bit slower, which is strange because my music taste is usually the faster the better, hence the AC/DC, Metallica love. But with Def Leppard, I think Joe Elliott's voice just goes so well when they're doing something more melodic and kind of slow with some harmonies. This On Through the Night album definitely feels like a prototype stage. It feels like the concepts are there, but they're trying really hard to be like other bands at the time with songs like Rock Brigade and Hello America. Satellite sounds the most Def Leppard-ish to me, if that makes any sense. You know how people are always saying, oh, this doesn't feel like Star Wars? Well, Satellite feels the most like Def Leppard on this album, which I put up there. It's one of their better ones. The first few are always kind of like lightning in a bottle, but I think it took Def Leppard more time to kind of fit into their niche than other places. So I'd go with Satellite on the basis that it sounds the most like they would later on.
And there are albums in their discography where, and we'll get to those albums a little bit later, where it's like you could tell they're experimenting with a couple different sounds. They're trying out some different things. Yes, by all means, there is a Def Leppard sound, and it did take some time to evolve into that sound. But off this album, I'm actually going to go with Answer to the Master off of this one here.
Ooh.
It's a very new wave of British heavy metal kind of song, and I think it's the dueling guitar parts. I mean, I was raised on Iron Maiden and Queensryche and that dual guitar kind of attack, and Answer to the Master really does fit into that Iron Maiden new wave of British heavy metal kind of feel to it. It's a great song, and I completely agree with you that, yes, Def Leppard is probably at their best when they're doing ballads and power ballads, but I got no problem with a little bit of new wave of British heavy metal styles.
Yes, and you know what? You hit the nail on the head. I think that's why I didn't put all of the songs on Through the Night are good. Like there's a lot of albums that Def Leppard has that are cover to cover good. There's not a lot of filler until they get kind of in their 90s period, but we'll get to that when we get to that.
Oh,
but
absolutely.
I do, and I think that's what it is. I think it sounds a lot like Iron Maiden and stuff, which is obviously amazing. They're a great band, but I guess that's why I picked Satellite. It sounds the most like this is the sliver of what they would become almost in their humble beginnings.
Oh, you could definitely hear the embryonic stage and the building of what would become the Def Leppard sound. But now we move on 1 year later to High and Dry, released July 6th of 1981. The album hit number 26 in the UK and number 38 in the US. It is double platinum in the US and platinum in Canada. There were two singles off of this one. Let It Go hit number 76 in the UK and number 34 in the US rock charts. Now, Mark Claddy went with Bringing on the Heartbreak. Cactus Pete went with Let It Go. Hulk Patriot chose No, 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 and Jeff Rusinells went with High and Dry. So we've knocked 4 songs off of that album already. So off of High and Dry, what did you go with?
So this was my first Def Leppard experience. I didn't get hooked on to everybody else's entry point, which is Pyromania and Hysteria, until later on. This was my first kind of exposure to it through a friend of mine's vinyl. Once I started kind of sniffing around rock music more, he was like, hey, if you like AC/DC, try this. And this was the album that we listened to. I'm going to go with Mirror Mirror off of this album. Ooh. All good choices by the people on X as well. Switch 625 is another one that's amazing live. I've seen Def Leppard twice live. That song live is so much fun. No, 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 another really good one represented. I'm glad somebody said that. That was my honorable mention. But Mirror Mirror is so good. It's got the power ballad with a little bit more of an up-tempo to it. The chorus is amazing. It's just, I love that song. I love this album, but I love that song so much.
See, I ended up siding with Mark on this one and went with Bringing on the Heartbreak. Like yourself, this was one of the first, experiences of Def Leppard. And of course, you watch on Much Music at the time when they actually played music. And this is one of the first songs that really kind of clicked with me from Def Leppard. And, those darker feeling kind of ballads that they would do, those power ballads. This was, I think, as much as we say that On Through the Night was kind of the embryonic stage, this is where the songwriting really kind of, fell into place as far as what that embryonic sound was supposed to be.
I 100% agree. I feel like this should be put up there and kind of held in the same regard as Pyromania is, but for some reason it doesn't. It's one of those ones where a lot of the songs were super big and now are live staples and things you see on the live albums and the compilations, but for some reason High and Dry itself isn't held in that regard for some reason, and I don't know why, because I really do think that this etched the path. Like, this walked so Pyromania and Hysteria could run.
Oh, absolutely. And you can see the progression from On Through the Night to High and Dry. It's not like, the albums got better and better. It wasn't like, those situations where you have your entire life to write that first album and then you hit that sophomore slump. This was constant walking forward in those early 80s years for Def Leppard. You mentioned Pyromania. That's next. Released January 20th, 1983. We have a member change on this one. Pete Willis was fired mid-recording on this album. Phil Collin joined in, provided the solos on 5 tracks, and helped finish making the album. It hit number 18 in the UK and number 2 in the US. It is, get your calculators out here, 10 times platinum in the US. That makes it diamond. 7 times platinum in Canada. It's silver in the UK and gold in France. There were 6 singles off of this one. Both Photograph and Rock of Ages both hit number 1 in the US rock charts. At the American Music Awards for this album cycle, the band was nominated for Fave Pop Rock Band, Duo, or Group. They lost to Daryl Hall and John Oates.
Not a bad competition there. If you're losing to Hall and Oates, you're not necessarily in bad company there.
Oh, I do get it. It's just 2 very, very different groups. But yes, Hall and Oates in the early 80s, yeah. But they were also
Rich Girl versus Photograph.
But they were also nominated for Fave Pop Rock Album. That lost, and there's zero question about this one, to Thriller from Michael Jackson. Yeah. Like the album to end all albums. Like any album that released in 1983, just bow down at that point.
There's not one thing you can do about that. Like you're going up against a god at that point, especially at that time frame. Like that's like going up against Taylor Swift nowadays.
Right? You could release the best album of your career and people will look and go, oh, 1983, Thriller. Yeah, shut up, right? Mark Cloudy and Cactus Pete both chose Photograph on this one. Hulk Patriot went with Rock Till You Drop, and Jeff Rusinellis went with Stage Fright. But off of Pyromania, what have you got?
I have probably one of my favorite top 3 Def Leppard songs. It's Foolin' off of this album. The hook for this song, the Foolin', that is in my bones. Going back and re-listening to everything was such a treat because it brought back memories of my childhood. Foolin' was a hockey dressing room song before every game. Absolutely love that song. Love the hook. Again, I think it makes complete use of Joe Elliott's voice, which I think drives Def Leppard. Phil Collin, glad that he's there. He's the better guitarist, I think, out of their discography. And they've had a couple instrument changes here and there, but the one thing that has driven this band through will always be the frontman's voice. He has one of the best voices in rock history, if you ask me, and it's on full display with Foolin'.
Oh, absolutely. And this is the full formation of the classic, almost the iconic Def Leppard lineup. And that's nothing against Pete Willis, and that's nothing against Vivian Campbell. But this is, when you think of Def Leppard, this is probably the lineup that most people think of immediately. And with Pyromania, like, this was the explosion at this point. Like, On Through the Night, good album, right? Great debut. High and Dry, things are starting to chug along. Pyromania comes out and it explodes like all over everywhere. And 6 singles? You are hard pressed to come up with an album today that's going to produce anywhere close to 6 singles unless you are just releasing singles and then call it an album afterwards.
It's so rare nowadays. If you have 3 off of one album, people are kind of writing articles about it and are like, wow, that's impressive. It doesn't happen anymore. That's just not the music industry anymore to release single and then make an album cover to cover. Now it's just try to make that one big song.
Yeah.
But this was a hit machine, and somehow it still kind of pales in comparison to the one that comes after it.
Oh yeah. But we talked about how good they are when they slow it down a little bit, they get to that power ballad mode. Too Late for Love. This may be one of my favorite slower songs from them. And again, it's one of those songs where, you listen to it, it's like, oh, it sounds really nice. You read the lyrics. Oh, it's not so nice. But, but you knew it, and it was played all the time. And yes, Photograph, absolutely. I get it. Rock Till You Drop. Like, these are all great, iconic songs. Rock of Ages, of course. Like, then you get the stage play called Rock of Ages. And it just goes to show you how iconic this album is and how iconic Def Leppard is when it comes to that 80s music scene. But for me, Too Late for Love stands out among them all.
And it's one of their better ballads, you're right. In a band where, like we've said before, he's almost better suited when he's slow. Too Late for Love does have a lot of those super high notes and the pitch that only he can seem to hit. It's an amazing song as well. You can't go wrong here. There's 2 or 3 albums in this that you could pick any song and I would 100% be like, I understand the argument.
I mean, there are bands that can't produce, the quality of songs that's on half of this album. And that's not to slag any band. I'm not going to name any band out there. But I mean, like this album had like some special sauce just layered on it.
And I'm going to try to not gush too much in this because I do love this band so much.
Oh, gush away.
There are few bands that, like you said, could keep up the pace that they kept up from 1980 to 1996. Quality after quality after quality, everything building on each other. No misses for a decade. Basically say a decade and some change, like a decade and 4 years. There is no other band to my recollection that has that. There are bands that release 2 amazing albums. They have a bit of a miss, then another amazing one, and they kind of hop back and forth in its peaks and valleys. But for Def Leppard, from 1980 with On Through the Night until one we'll talk about later in 1996, 99 area, there was no misses here. Like, all of the albums were good. Some were amazing, and some were just like 8 out of 10 and not 10 out of 10. But the fact that you're staying in that upper echelon of quality for that long, in a time period that was full of bands that were absolutely amazing, coming out with the best work that's still getting played today. There's reasons that there are rock stations that are still committed to music that came out in this era because it was so good. So for them to have this kind of control over the market there, like, you just don't see it today. There's no band that could do this kind of pace today.
And I think the key thing for them too is that they were cross genre. They were mass wide appeal. I mean, you could sit there and say, well, Iron Maiden was able to do this over this stretch of time. Like, you think around this time, you're getting albums like, Seventh Son of a Seventh Son and Power Slave, and eventually into No Fear, Fear of the Dark, and of course, like, so many good albums, but it wasn't mass appeal. Probably the only comparison you could draw at this time was maybe Bon Jovi. Because, of course, as soon as, and very similar to Def Leppard, where On Through the Night and High and Dry were good albums, but that was the embryonic stage building. Whereas Bon Jovi, you had 7,800 Degrees Fahrenheit, and I can't remember what the other album was before you hit Slippery When Wet with that third album. Yeah. And all of a sudden, everything explodes, and it keeps going from there. You had almost parallel paths with Def Leppard and Bon Jovi, just on different sides of the Atlantic.
And it's very true. And also, much like Def Leppard, with High and Dry and with On Through the Night, those 2 albums almost were not discovered until their big pop happened, until Pyromania, Hysteria, and Slippery When Wet. Then people start digging in a little bit and realizing, oh my God, their past stuff is just as good as, like, that's when almost the previous albums get the respect they deserve. And I think that's why High and Dry kind of gets left off the radar a little bit, because it didn't get brought into the fold until people retroactively looked at the band after they hit their highest high, which we're about to talk about.
Oh yeah, and you get people like, during the Bon Jovi era, it's like, oh yeah, I love this song, You Could Love a Bad Name, and it's like, yeah, well, do you know Runaway? It's flashing back to some of those. Here, it's probably like, oh, Pyromania is such a great album, Rock Till You Drop. It's like, yeah, well, have you heard Stage Fright?
Yeah, really, like, put on your gatekeeping glasses, everybody.
Yeah, well, just take the gatekeeping glasses off. Music is for everyone. No gatekeepers.
True. I love it
whatsoever.
I hate gatekeeping. When the Metallica resurgence happened with Stranger Things, it was a war in Twitter. X now.
I don't care what day, what year, and what decade you jumped on the Metallica bandwagon. Welcome aboard.
Exactly.
We now move on to probably the biggest album of Def Leppard's career, Hysteria, released August 3rd, 1987, and this is the first album after Rick Allen's car accident and the loss of his arm. It hit number 1 in 6 countries. It is 12 times platinum in the US, 13 times platinum in Canada, 4 times platinum in Australia, double platinum in the UK, platinum in New Zealand and Switzerland. We talked about Pyromania with 6 singles, 7 singles off of this one. Armageddon It and Love Bites both hit number 3 in the US rock charts, and Love Bites eventually hit number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100. At the MTV VMAs, Pour Some Sugar on Me was nominated for Best Heavy Metal Video. It lost to Sweet Child of Mine from Guns N' Roses. They were also nominated for best stage performance in a video, and that just tells you what the videos in the 80s were like. They lost to Cult of Personality by Living Colour. And at the American Music Awards, they won for favorite heavy metal hard rock artist and album. However, they were nominated for fave pop rock band duo or group. They lost to Gloria Estefan and Miami Sound Machine.
Oh, wow.
Come
What
on,
a
baby, come
company
on,
to keep.
do the conga.
No, you can't control yourself any longer.
Oh, yeah, there we go. And fave pop rock album, they were nominated, but they lost to the Dirty Dancing soundtrack, which means they lost to an album with Patrick Swayze singing.
Man, that's such a wild group. Like, if you put them together, a Venn diagram, they only cross there, I think. That's a crazy company.
Although, that being said, Joe Elliott would kill singing She's Like the Wind.
Yeah, you're right. Joe Elliott could do the entire soundtrack for Dirty Dancing, I think. I'd love to hear his rendition of Hungry Eyes.
Hungry Eyes.
Yes.
No, and no. Getting to the shoutouts here. Mark Claddy chose Pour Some Sugar on Me. Cactus Pete went with Love and Affection. And both Hulk Patriot and Jeff Rusinellos chose Hysteria. And I'm not going to lie, I sided with Hulk Patriot and Jeff Rusinellos. Hysteria is the quintessential song to me where it does not matter what mood you're in. If you're in a happy mood, you can listen to Hysteria and you get happier. If you're in a sad mood, you can listen to Hysteria and also feel melancholy at the same time. It's a weird mid-tempo song that literally, no matter how you're feeling, no matter what mood you're in, it sounds good.
Man, this is difficult. This is a perfect album to me. I've said this to several people before. If there's one album cover to cover that does not have any filler, a lot of people can say a lot of things, and my favorite artist has this album and that album. Yes, it's all personal bias. I don't think you could find a person that, if they never listened to Def Leppard before or any kind of rock music from this era, if you sit them down and play Hysteria cover to cover, they will love it. This is as close as you can get, I think, to a perfect package musically, brand-wise. The cover is amazing. The story is amazing. They wanted to fire Rick Allen after the motorcycle accident that cost him his arm. Joe Elliott and the rest of the band were basically like, absolutely not. We're going to retrofit a drum kit for him and figure out a way to do this. And of course, now it's famous. He has this ridiculous Autobot-looking drum kit where everything he used to do with the hand that he lost, he now does with that foot. So for them to come out with this album after that happened and have it just be a decade-defining romp is amazing to me. It's impossible to pick one song. You've asked me to do something that is not possible. So if I had a gun to my head and somebody was like, you got to pick one album off of this, or one song off of this album, I would probably have to go with Gods of War. And the reason is,
that's a good song.
And the reason is, I'm going back to my youth again. Def Leppard was my hockey soundtrack, and Gods of War is just a fight song. The harmonies on it are amazing. You feel real angsty when you listen to it because you feel like it's a statement. I love the chorus, the harmonies involved with it. It's just an amazing song. But there's nothing you can pick here that isn't. Pour Some Sugar on Me, maybe one of the most recognizable guitar riffs of all time. Animal was the close second. I had Animal crossed off on my notes here because I was going to pick it first, and Hysteria was also there. Excitable, also worth mentioning. It's such a really happy, upbeat one, but I think the quality is in one of the sleeper hits of it, and that's Gods of War.
And I think the thing with Rick Allen's drum kit, because you had to have electronic triggers and you had a more modern sound, if you will, like obviously leaning into the 80s and electronic, this is part of what made the Def Leppard sound to me.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes, Robert John Mutt Lange being the producer on this and Pyromania, like obviously he helped craft that sound. And if you listen to albums that he was working on as a producer at the time, there's a reason why Bryan Adams and Def Leppard both kind of sound the same around this era here. But I do think that building that kit and making sure Rick Allen was still part of the band helped define the quintessential commercial Def Leppard sound.
I completely agree. The word I use to describe it when people ask me, Like, how does this sound different? Because like you always get the argument all 80s rock sounds the same. But when people ask me what differentiates this, Def Leppard is the cleanest and most crisp sounding band from that era. They are the ones that have the most polish on it. It doesn't sound like, sometimes a dirty sound adds to a band, but with Def Leppard, I think their clean, crisp energy. It almost sounds like it sounds like I would imagine what solar power sounds like, if that makes any sense. I'm trying to give it like life, but it sounds so clean. It sounds so energized, but at the same time it can be reserved. And you're right, it's that almost electronic hum of the Rick Allen drum set that comes through, and you hear a little bit more post production than you would on other albums at the time. It's a little bit ahead of its time, because I think if these songs came out today, they would have been as popular as if when they came out, if that makes any sense.
And the thing is, like, I get that there are, for lack of a better term, music purists, getting back to the whole gatekeeper thing, talking about electronic drums not being real drums.
Yeah, absolutely not.
But you have to remember, this is the mid to late 80s here. And arguably one of the greatest drummers of all time, Neil Peart from Rush, was experimenting with electronic drums. Like, if you go back and listen to the A Show of Hands live album and you hear how much there is electronic drums in his basic songwriting as far as a lot of those songs go of that era, you know, yes, there are different eras of Rush. But just because a kid is electronic doesn't mean the drummer isn't freaking talented.
And I never understood the thought process of just because it's electronic means that it doesn't take as much skill to play. I don't understand that. You're still writing the beats. He's still keeping time for the entire band up there during his performances. Like, I never understood the thought process of going electric means you're losing something. Yes, it's a different sound and you have more tools at your disposal and it's a little bit easier, quote unquote, maybe than the regular drums. But I don't understand why there's such a purist stance of, oh, well, they went electric, they sold out. Similar to Bob Dylan when it happened to him. I remember there was a famous concert where he plugged in an electric guitar and people walked out. It's like, what does that mean? It's less of a guitar? He still has to play it, just like the drums. There's still a masterclass going on in that seat, even if it's just a different looking kit.
Oh, exactly. We now move on to Adrenalize, released March 31st, 1992. The album was recorded as a 4-piece because, of course, this was made after the death of Steve Clark. Vivian Campbell eventually joined the band after the release of the album, and there is the current and, I guess, permanent lineup of Def Leppard because it hasn't changed since then. This album hit number 1 in 6 countries. It is triple platinum in the US, quadruple platinum in Canada, platinum in the UK, Australia, and Switzerland. There are, once again, 7 singles off of this one. Let's Get Rocked and Stand Up, Kick Love into Motion both hit number 1 on the US rock charts. At the MTV VMAs, they were nominated for Viewer's Choice. They lost to Under the Bridge by Red Hot Chili Peppers. At the Best Metal Hard Rock Video Award, they lost to Enter Sandman from Metallica. They were nominated for Best Special Effects in a Video, of course, for Let's Get Rocked. They lost to Even Better Than the Real Thing from U2. And they were nominated for Video of the Year, but they lost to Right Now by Van Halen. And at the 1993 American Music Awards, they were nominated for Favorite Heavy Metal Hard Rock Artist, and they lost to Metallica. Mark Claddy chose Let's Get Rocked. Cactus Pete went with Heaven Is. Hulk Patriot went with Stand Up, Kick Love into Motion. And Jeff Rusinellis went with White Lightning. So off of Adrenalize, what did you go with?
I'm very happy that a lot of the good songs are getting picked up by ex-users, but I picked Tear It Down, the final song on the album.
Ooh.
I think it has this driving force behind it. The Rick Allen drums are amazing in it. Love the breakdowns. I just think it's all of them are good. It's another one. This is a band on the back foot. This album, I think, a little bit. They're faced with a monumental task of following up an album that you always want your stuff to do good, but no band. They didn't release Hysteria saying this is going to be one of the albums that defines an entire decade of music. They didn't think that, I don't think. They didn't think 7 singles were going to be that big. Then to have one of your band members pass away and have to be dealing with that. So it's just... This is a band that is trying a monumental task here, and they do a pretty good job following up Hysteria. a lot of the songs sound like they could have been. If there was a Hysteria bonus version, 4 or 5 of these would have made it. White Lightning is amazing. Stand Up Kick Love into Motion. I would argue that and Two Steps Behind are probably their best ballads. But I think Tear It Down, like I said, it's got that driving force behind it. I think this could have been a lot bigger song if it was released as a single by itself.
I still remember watching the Freddie Mercury tribute concert. And before Queen got up and did their set with all the other singers, you had bands that were coming out and doing shorter sets just to get them to Queen's set. And Def Leppard was obviously one of those bands at the time. And this, to my memory, was the first time that Vivian Campbell played live with Def Leppard. Like this was the, welcome to the band. By the way, we're playing Wembley in front of all these Queen fans, and that can't be intimidating at all. But I mean, it's Vivian Campbell, right? So it's all good. But I mean, I have a special place in my heart for this album because this is the tour where I got to see Def Leppard for the one and only time in my life that I got to see them. It was at the Ottawa Civic Center where the Ottawa 67s play. And I distinctly remember this show very well because, I work in TV, so I'm a bit of a TV geek. And at that show, at the Ottawa Civic Center at Lansdowne Park, they filmed the video that night for I Want to Touch You. It was like one of the last singles off of this album. So if there's a spot where if you freeze frame it very, very carefully and, pull like the Blade Runner enhance, you might be able to see a very young me at that show because I was right on the rail. And this, of course, was, when they were in the round too. So it was such a cool show, but it was really hard to focus on. Do I focus on the band or do I focus on the Steadicam camera guy running around the stage? Because that's pretty cool too. Not the song I went with though.
Have you ever gone on and seen if you were there? Have you combed through the footage to see if you can find yourself?
I mean, if memory serves, the video's in black and white, so it's kind of hard to tell. I do know the exact shot because I remember exactly where I was standing, and I'm pretty sure I have seen me, but it's a little on the blurry side. Keep in mind too, 1992, 93, that's standard def, so it's not as crisp and clean.
It's like one of those conspiracy theorists taking a picture all blurry. That's me, I swear.
Well, I mean, when you think about, being at a show where there's a music video or whether there's a live DVD being filmed, and I've been at both now. Like I've been there for music video and I've been there for live concert recordings, and occasionally I have seen myself in like a freeze frame or something like that at some of those shows. Not Def Leppard, but the Queensryche, actually Mindcrime at the Moore. I'm pretty sure I have seen myself in the crowd on that one. But for a song pick, I ended up going with White Lightning. I sided with Jeff Rusnells on this one here. I'm a Def Leppard guy. Not just a Def Leppard guy, but I'm also a Dream Theater guy, as I've said on the show numerous times. So I like the longer songs. There's a lot of complexity to this one, but this song was also kind of like their tribute to Steve Clark. So this song hits really hard when you think about it like that.
And there's emotion in it too. You can hear the emotion in his voice. It was a tribute to a fallen friend. So yeah, that makes total sense. But it's just like the last two. You could pick any song here, and I would not judge you at all. Maybe except "Make Love Like a Man." That one's kind of weird, especially today's connotations. But
I just want someone to at a show play "Make Love Like a Man" and then "Man, I Feel Like a Woman," back to back,
right next to each other.
Exactly.
Just really confuse everybody.
I will say, in my opinion, I think White Lightning is probably the best guitar solo of any Def Leppard song ever.
Oh, I don't know. Run Riot has a really good guitar solo right in the middle there where it speeds up and kind of starts to match the pace of the drums. But that's a good one. That's a close second. I would say Run Riot's still first for me, but that is a close second.
We now move on to a collection of songs, B-sides, and stuff that had never been put onto an album before, and that is Retroactive. Released October 5th, 1993, and Vivian Campbell at this point is a full-time member of the band. It hit number 6 in the UK and number 9 in the US. It is platinum in the US and Canada and gold in Switzerland. There were 4 singles off of this one. Two Steps Behind, of course, hit number 5 on the US rock charts, a song that was also featured on the Last Action Hero soundtrack. Mark Clady went with Two Steps Behind, and Hulk Patriot went with Fractured Love. What did you go with?
I went with Action the revised version. I think that's one of their stronger songs that doesn't really get talked about enough because it isn't so much focused on the formula of verse, chorus, and kind of stay. It's got a really different hook to it as well. Everybody wants a piece of the action. It's a nice switch up from the usual like power chorus that they do for their faster stuff. It's the definition of a B-side for Def Leppard, and I really like it.
And it has kind of that T-Rex kind of feel to it. And
Yeah,
obviously T-Rex being a big influence on them.
and it's a little dirtier. Like I said, one of their best things is that they're very clean and very crisp. But with this album, it does feel like there's a toe dip into experimentation a little bit, which really comes out in the next one. But you can tell here they were kind of trying to see like what different directions they could go in that would stick with people.
Every now and then you say something and it's like it feels like we rehearsed this because you gave me the perfect lead in to my song off of this album when you mentioned experimentation, because I ended up going with From the Inside off of this one.
Oh yeah. And that's experimentation.
Oh yeah.
For sure.
It's basically Celtic. It's Def Leppard Celtic at this point. But there's something almost cinematic to it. Like I could see this being like one of those, fantasy adventure type films, and this is the point in the hero's journey where the hero starts to doubt if they're actually going to be able to do what it is that they have to do. It's a great song and definitely something that you wouldn't expect out of them.
Absolutely. It is funny because it does feel like we rehearsed this, because I immediately thought when I re-listened to this, I said it feels like something that would play in The Witcher. Like it feels like something that would be the background of like a dark fantasy, like the Dark Crystal, or something that had a little bit more craziness thrown into it than Lord of the Rings, but it does. It feels like a fantasy epic.
Oh, yeah. If you put the lyrics, toss a coin to your Witcher in that song, it would not feel out of place at all.
It's Dandelion, featuring Dandelion is who it is. Like,
all right, we now move on to more experimentation with Slang. Released May 14th, 1996, the album hit number 5 in the UK and number 14 in the US. It is platinum in Canada and only gold in US and the UK. There were 4 singles off of this one, Work It Out being the highest. It hit number 6 on the US rock charts. Mark Cloudy went with Deliver Me, Cactus Pete went with Turn to Dust, Hulk Patriot went with Truth, and Jeff Rusinellis went with Blood Runs Cold. So you got 4 songs that have 4 people on this one off of X. Did you side with them or did you go with something else?
I just seem to be going with something else. Me and X are on a different wavelength today, I guess. I went with the title track. I went with Slang. I think it does have that kind of Walk This Way, Aerosmith featuring Run DMC feel to it. I think that they were trying something with this album that they didn't necessarily stick the landing with. It feels like they're trying to be 2 other bands at the same time. It feels like there's Nirvana sprinkled in there. It feels like they're trying to be a little hip hop in places they shouldn't be. I don't know. I think it's just not my thing. I just was 1 year old when this came out. Maybe it was big when it happened, but I just feels like a little bit too off of the formula. Shouldn't stick to the formula exactly, but I don't think you should go this far away from it. I liked Slang. I think that was the perfect kind of golden ratio of just far enough outside of the comfort zone, but still sticking with what makes them really popular and sounds amazing. Slang is one very, very big bright light in a track list that I do not enjoy this album.
I'll admit, this was not an easy album for me. Not every band is going to have every album be a banger all the way through. And I completely agree. Like 1996, you think about this in a musical surrounding, if you will. You're basically after the explosion of grunge at the beginning of your late 90s boy band, very bubblegum pop kind of explosion as well. And you're also in the middle of the industrial, section as well. So you can hear a little bit of that in Truth, which was going to be my pick until I got to the end. And Move With Me Slowly. This is a song. Yeah, it's got a bit of a bluesy groove, and it's one of those ones I'd love to hear this song acoustically, and which to me is always the linchpin of a song. If you can play it acoustically, it's a phenomenal song. And here, this is one of those songs where it leans into that good Joe Elliott vocal rhythm, if you will. And yeah, if it's got a bluesy groove, you can't really go wrong with blues in a good rock band.
No, it's true. It is more the bluesy ones. I don't know. Maybe that one didn't stick with me as good as you. It does. It's one of the better ones for sure out of the huge swath of tracks on here that are very very forgettable. But it does make sense because I think by default, if you find one of the lesser Def Leppard albums, if you go to the slower stuff, you'll find the gems out of their worst albums.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. We get to the end of the 90s with Euphoria. Released June 8th, 1999, it hit number 11 in the UK and the US. It's gold in Canada and the States. 5 singles off of this one. Promises hit number 1 on the US rock charts. Mark Cloudy ended up going with Demolition Man. Cactus Pete and Hulk Patriot both went with Promises. And Jeff Rosenellis went with Paper Sun. And once again, I agree with Jeff Rosenellis. Paper Sun almost has that White Lightning vibe to me on this one. Almost, I'm not going to say Middle Eastern style flavor to it, but for me, the song is good by itself. And by the way, I also had Demolition Man, Promises, and Guilty on my contenders list. But it's the end of the song for me because it goes into this almost extra post bridge, if you will. And it's like, where are they going? Where were they going? Okay, I love the way they end this. It's something a little different. It's kind of like the end of Home for a Rest from Spirit of the West, where you got the song, and then they get into almost this different riff rally at the end. It's like, it's a new song. I like it. I'm all for it. But off of Euphoria, what did you go with?
First of all, I'm going to say Home for a Rest. You're tickling all the right ivories there with my East Coast soul. But I finally, me and X seem to be on the same wavelength because the best song on this album is Promises. It's such a good song. I think it has the same power as the Hysteria years. I think this was a return to form after Slang. I think they found that golden ratio that I mentioned with Slang, the song, and realized, okay, this is our limit. Anything past this, and we're getting too far into different territory. Because Paper Sun, like you said, still very experimental in ways, but they ring it back in and still keep it Def Leppard-y and feel. And I think that's what this album is. It's what kind of Slang maybe should have been. Mm-hmm. Promises is amazing. Guilty is my second pick. It was a very difficult choice between Promises and Guilty. Probably the hardest choice between two songs that I had during this whole ride, because Guilty is an amazing song, one of their best slow ones. I was lucky enough that they played that as a deep cut when I saw them live in Bangor, and I was so excited because I do love that song so much. But Promises, I think, drives this whole album. Demolition Man is great. It and Run Riot, I think, are kind of like brother-sister songs. It was another one I listened to a lot for hockey, but Promises is the one that sticks with me later into life.
I can only imagine, like, just the string of success if Euphoria was the follow-up to Adrenalize.
Yes.
I mean,
because that's what it feels like. It feels like Adrenalize happened, Retroactive and Slang were kind of like a hiccup, and then Euphoria was like, okay, we're back.
And it did feel like with this album, they went back and said, okay, what is Def Leppard? And you can hear certain callbacks to different songs that kind of define the different aspects of Def Leppard on this album. And it does. It's a highly underrated album, in my opinion.
Yes, that's actually what I have written right beside it is, if this was released congruently, it would have been a lot bigger. I feel like at this point, too, it's 1999, and the Def Leppard, the 1980s music had just kind of fallen off at that point, too. We are at full-scale bubblegum pop. Music is strange in 1999. So the fact that they were releasing an album that had this much quality on it that still sticks today, when a lot of the bands at this point from their era had most definitely fallen off and were not releasing as much quality. Some had just disbanded completely. There's a lot of bands that were huge in the 80s that had their 10 years in the sun and then they kind of went away. But this is kind of a testament to the staying power, even up till today, and we'll talk about it a little bit later on. But the fact that you did have songs that were so good, like Demolition Man, Promises, Guilty, Paper Sun, like the fact you had 4 or 5 bangers on an album in 1999 from a band that came out in 1980, it should have been released a little bit earlier, and I think it would have been higher up in history.
Plus, you get bands that get to a point where they've been around long enough, they've done everything and achieved more than many bands, of their day have. And after a while, you're like, we're going to do whatever the hell we want because we're Def Leppard. And that works well.
And I think that's kind of what happened with the next couple of albums, as a matter of fact.
Oh, absolutely. After Y2K, of course, becomes X. That's my algebra for lesson for the day. Released July 30th, 2002. It hit number 14 in the UK and number 11 in the US. There were 3 singles off of this one, now being the highest charting. It hit number 23 in the UK and 26 on the US rock charts. Cactus Pete ended up going with 4-letter word. Hulk Patriot went with You're So Beautiful, and Jeff Rusinellis chose Torn to Shreds. So off of X, what have you got?
I went with 4-letter word as well. I think that is another bit of a sleeper hit for them. I think it's because it's lost in another. I'll put X next to Slang as probably one of their weaker releases. I think it's just because they were lost in 2002. Rock was really at a low point then. There was a new wave coming up that was not very Def Leppard friendly, I will say. So at this point in time, it's difficult to make an album like this work because it was so many slow 1980s rock ballads, which if you're Def Leppard, that's your bread and butter. But just at the time frame, I think it wasn't that strong. But 4-letter word is a very good song.
Well, when you think, too, and you go back to Euphoria being released in 1999, and of course, we've all seen the documentaries of Woodstock 99, and just what the music scene was at that time. Bands like Korn and Limp Bizkit, and you had a lot of rage going on at that time. And here's Def Leppard just singing happy songs. It's they almost felt like an anachronism, but a stubborn anachronism that you had to give them kudos for doing whatever the hell they wanted, which is more badass than most people out there.
Agreed. It's they had their style, they knew what was working, and they stuck to it, even when everything around them was probably telling them that this isn't going to work anymore.
For my pick, though, I'm going with a bonus track on the album, and it's the acoustic version of Long, Long Way to Go. Now, originally, it was going to be a toss-up between the original of this song and then You're So Beautiful, but then the acoustic version hits, and you're like, holy crap. This is the definitive version, not just of the song itself, but again, Joe Elliott, softer side of his vocals, right? Acoustic guitars, like this band. I am surprised, with all the songs that they have not put out a full acoustic album yet.
And it's odd because in the 2 times that I've seen them, Jason, they did almost half of their set acoustically. They came out, they sit down, and they do, I think it was 4 or 5 of their really big hits they did acoustically when I saw them in both Bangor and in Toronto. It was really strange that you're right. This is one of the bands that I think all of their songs would translate well. If you had like a 12-string and a 6-string acoustic guitar, you could do a beautiful greatest hits album.
Oh yeah, just a stripped down version of the songs, I think would be phenomenal. Also, if that ever happens now, World, you're welcome. You heard it here first.
Yeah, we gave them the idea.
Right, it's all us. Now we move on to an album of full covers, released May 23rd, 2006, and the release of Yeah. The album hit number 52 in the UK and 16 in the US. There were 3 singles off of this one. Rock On hit number 18 on the US rock charts. Cactus Pete went with No Matter What, and Hulk Patriot chose Rock On. What did you go with off of Yeah?
Yeah is very forgettable to me because it's a strange thing to come out with a full cover album, I think. I don't know. You can take somebody else's song and you can cover it well. There's some great covers out there. Just off the top of my head, Hootie and the Blowfish do a cover of Losing My Religion. I think it's better than the original. There's a couple songs that bands that can make another person's song their own, but I think with Def Leppard, it feels strange. I went with Don't Believe a Word. I'm going to say I have 2. I have Drive In Sunday and Don't Believe a Word, and they're just equal to each other in my notes, but I'm going to go with Don't Believe a Word. It's a banger song on a forgettable album. I think this is one of those songs that is hidden in the time period. I wish this would have came out earlier. I think it would have been one of their bigger hits.
Every now and then a band does put out a covers album and you're like, really? You guys are doing that?
It just seems out of place.
Yeah, I remember Queensryche putting out their Take Cover album. And I mean, Queensryche, had, again, I'm biased. I'm a Queensryche fan. But I didn't foresee them. Yes, they had done covers in the past. They had done the cover of Scarborough Fair, which is phenomenal. But for them to do like a full album of covers, and some of them I'm just like, maybe you shouldn't have covered that song. But there are some where I'm like, absolutely, this slays. Like they did a cover of Heaven on Their Mind from Jesus Christ Superstar, and it kills. But for this album, I mean, yes, they're leaning into bands that influence them. Of course, you got T-Rex on there, but I ended up going with Hanging on the Telephone. So, and I was the song's great, but when I started to read into this, and you realize the life of this song itself, it's insane. So the song was originally recorded by a band called The Nerves, which lasted like one album. But then the song itself became famous with Blondie covered it. And since then, not only has Def Leppard covered it, but also L7 has done it. And Melissa Rauch from The Big Bang Theory did this song.
What?
As the voice of Harley Quinn in Batman and Harley Quinn. It's a great song. It's a phenomenal song, but I love when a song's got a story to it as well. I almost went with No Matter What because I have played that song live, and it is kind of a fun, again, mid-tempo groover, but Hanging on the Telephone, great song, and I think Def Leppard did it justice on this one.
I had no idea that song had so many covers. Melissa Roach of all people. That is amazing. I had no idea.
And yes, Melissa Rauch as Harley Quinn.
Really good.
Yep.
I give her a thumbs up. Obviously, it's hard to replace Strong, but at the same time, like, she's got a great voice for it.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. We now move on to Songs from the Sparkle Lounge. The album was released April 25th, 2008. It hit number 10 in the UK and number 5 in the US. There were 2 singles off of this one. 9 Lives was the only one to chart anywhere. It hit number 38 in Canada. Yay, Canada. Cactus Pete went with 9 Lives, Hulk Patriot went with Go, and Jeff Rusnells went with Only the Good Die Young. But off of Songs from the Sparkle Lounge, what did you go with?
Let me tell you something. Let me talk to you, Jason. People need to listen to this album cover to cover and realize that it might be one of their best albums out there. I absolutely love Songs from the Sparkle Lounge. I have 2 physical Def Leppard albums nowadays on vinyl. I have Hysteria, and I have Songs from the Sparkle Lounge on vinyl. I am a country music fan. I was raised on it, like I said at the beginning of the episode. When this came out, I was in middle school, and I was in full 1980s rock regalia. I was angsty. I just thought that I was born in the wrong time. And when this came out, and there was a feature of Tim McGraw with Def Leppard, this was the best thing that ever happened to me musically for like 4 years. 9 Lives by a mile. It's on my favorite playlist that I listen to every day. Whenever it comes on, I still get that little jolt of excitement because it's such a good song. I think Joe Elliott and Tim McGraw play off each other amazingly because their voices next to each other, you would think it wouldn't work because Tim McGraw is very low and very like, how do I put this? Joe Elliott's voice is vodka and Tim McGraw's is like really smooth, dark rum. Total different vibes to it. You wouldn't think it works until you hear them side by side, but it is an amazing song. And other songs on there that didn't get picked, I can't believe nobody picked Bad Actress. That's an amazing song as well. And Come Undone as well. 2 close seconds there, but nothing tops 9 Lives.
The fact that you have artists like Tim McGraw that are so eager to jump onto a song with Def Leppard, it just goes to show you the respect that Def Leppard has. But, even as far as duets go, I mean, obviously they had that release with Taylor Swift at the New York Taylor.
Yeah, they did Crossroads.
Yeah, but the Taylor Hawkins New York tribute concert, and they performed with Miley Cyrus joining them for Photograph, which is a phenomenal version of that song as well. Like, their songs lend themselves to anyone hopping on stage and singing along with them.
And I think it's just because they are so timeless. There's some songs from the 80s that are a bit dated, but I would assume it's the same thing with you. When you saw them live, I saw them most recently. I believe it was 2017 or 18 when they were touring with Motley Crue and Poison. And they still sound exactly the same, Jason. Like, Joe Elliott's voice has not given an inch. It still sounds amazing. They sound exactly like they do on tape. So I think that has something to do with it too. There's this timeless feel about them, and very clearly they've inspired like generations of people. But you're right, just the fact that an artist would go so out of his wheelhouse, like Tim McGraw, to appear on an album like this is amazing. And it's even better that it was a home run of a song, because it just goes to show that people should experiment more like this. I wish more country music artists would team up with rock artists to make stuff like this, because it is such an amazing song.
Okay, so now we're just going to manifest that eventual Def Leppard acoustic album that is now going to happen because we mentioned it on the show is going to be an acoustic duets album, and it's just different artists from different genres joining Def Leppard duetting on their songs.
Book it right now. 2 Steps Behind with Chris Stapleton.
Interesting. I can see that, actually. I can see that.
We need a Chris Stapleton, Joe Elliott team up, because they're just the two of the best voices I've ever heard together. We've got to get that going.
But for my song off of this album, it was originally going to be Hallucinate, because that's a great song. And you're right, this is a good album, yeah. But since you mentioned it, my song pick is actually Bad Actress.
Yes, of this thank you.
Because, I mean,
it's so good.
You know me. I'm a rocker. You know, I got a little bit of that punk attitude going, and this song's got a lot of, it's got a lot of attitude to it.
It does. It's got a driving bass line, driving drum line to it. It's very much like it is. It's on the punk scale. I would say it's on the punk scale. It's such a good song, but this album I think is underrated in all, because everything on here is good. Only the Good Die Young. Somebody off Twitter or X picked that, I heard, and that was, I didn't know if anybody would, but that is another really good one that's up there.
Yeah, the song brims with Def Leppitude. That's a new saying now. Trademark
Def Leppitude, I love it.
We now go on to their self-titled album, released October 30th, 2015. The album hit number 11 in the UK and number 10 in the US. There were 4 singles off of this one: Let's Go, Dangerous, Man Enough, and We Belong. Unfortunately, none of them charted. Cactus Pete ended up going with Dangerous, Hulk Patriot went with All Time High, and Jeff Rusinellis went with We Belong. What did you go with?
I went with Dangerous. I think it was they were obviously trying to basically, okay, let's make a bare bones Def Leppard album in 2015 and let's see how it goes. Let's see if it floats. And unfortunately, none of them charted. But if you're a fan of Def Leppard, everything here you're going to like. It's just not going to be as memorable as some of the other stuff, unfortunately. Because I think at this point of the game, when you're 2015 and you're releasing a self-titled album, and it's kind of just wearing its heart on its sleeve, and it's, okay, here's us, here's the basic stuff you love, it's going to get lost, and you're just going to want to listen to Hysteria, if that makes any sense. But on an album that is very by the numbers, Dangerous is the best of them all, I think.
Oh, absolutely. And, with this album, you have, again, Def Leppard leaning into what makes Def Leppard really, really good, and their ability to do a ballad. So yes, for my song, I ended up going with Last Dance.
Oh, that's a good one.
When you think about it, I mean, again, you've got good acoustics in this. You've got, good singing in this, great lyrics. You can see this song being the second last song at any wedding or high school dance. Of course.
Yeah, it's very much a last call bar closer. Like, okay, everybody, here's a slow one to get everybody out, to send them all home. You know what I mean?
Until we play Stairway to Heaven. Yeah, no, but seriously though, Last Dance is one of those songs that you could see someone be, playing it at their wedding, or maybe it is actually someone's wedding song. It's a gorgeous song, but it's an understated song for them.
Yeah, that's a good way to, understated is a really good way to describe it. Understated, I think, is a good way to describe this whole album. Honestly, because I think there's glimmers here of something really good. Another song I had written down was We Belong. For kind of that same reason. It felt the most Def Leppardish, but it just felt like it was down one notch. It wasn't cranked up to 11. It was on like a 9, and it just needed something, a little extra kick. And I don't even know what that is, but this whole album just felt understated. That's the best way to put it.
Now, not that understated is necessarily a bad thing. You can have a slightly dialed back song, but still brim with the great songwriting ability. Like, not everything needs to be as upfront as Let's Get Rocked or Pour Some Sugar on Me. You can have a song that sits in the pocket very comfortably.
Yeah, and sometimes that's even better because I think songs like Let's Get Rocked, like I don't necessarily like Let's Get Rocked as a song because it reminds me a lot of like Kiss's I Want to Rock and Roll All Night, Party Every Day. It's just the same two lines over and over and over again. And I think obviously that has its place. Like when you're ready to party, that's what you're going to. But at the same time, like you said, if you want to sit and listen to an album cover to cover, you need some substance to it. And I think that's one thing this band does well, even in an album like this that's a little bit under the radar and kind of just meh. That still shines through the fact that every one of these songs is its own piece of musically aligned sheet music with lyric. It's all a complete package. They didn't try to put any filler in, even if it sounds like sometimes they did.
Mm-hmm. We now move on to Diamond Star Halos, released during the pandemic of May 27th, 2022. Hit number 5 in the UK, number 10 in the US. And to all the bands that put out albums during the pandemic, God bless you. You guys made some great music and made a tough time a little bit easier to get through. There were 3 singles off of this one. Kick hit the US rock charts at number 34. Cactus Pete went with Take What You Want. Hulk Patriot went with All We Need, and Jeff Rusinellis chose SOS Emergency. So off of Diamond Star Halos, what's your song?
I also went with SOS Emergency.
Okay.
I think this was the same kind of thing like you said. The pandemic was weird. Every album that came out felt different just because you're wondering what kind of production loops did they have to jump through to get this done. I obviously my heart wants to go with the Alison Krauss features because there's 2 of them in Lifeless and the guitar, but I think they were kind of too on the Alison Krauss side and not as enough on the Def Leppard side. SOS Emergency kind of fits into that same feel as Hysteria and Animal. I think it scratched that same itch. Feels more like some of their older stuff. Kick is also really good. I think Kick. I can't believe Kick didn't do better than it did, but I think SOS Emergency is the most quality hit here.
Well, if it makes you feel any better, Kick is actually my song pick off of this album here.
Hey, perfect.
Right? Yeah, I mean, this album as a whole, I kind of put it alongside Slang in that there are some really good songs on here, but as a whole, it doesn't stand up to albums like Adrenalize or Euphoria or songs from the Sparkle Lounge, like as a whole. But Kick is definitely one of those songs where it does. It has that Def Leppard feel to it and stands out amongst the rest of the songs on the album.
We really have to see if there's something going on here because I had written down next to Diamond Star Halos, it feels like Slang Part 2. Yeah. So it's funny you say that. We really are on the same wavelength with a lot of the Def Leppard stuff because it does. It has that same feel of like they tried something here, but it didn't necessarily hit.
Let's see, this is what happens when I hack your computer and steal your notes.
Well, the government's doing it anyway. So.
we now move on to the last album of the Def Leppard discography thus far, and that is Drastic Symphonies, the album that is orchestral versions of their songs as done with the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra. Released May 19th of 2023, it hit number 4 in the UK and only number 54 in the US. There was one single off of this one, Animal, unfortunately did not chart. And Hulk Patriot off this album chose Too Late for Love. And once again, Hulk Patriot, you got some good taste here because I ended up going with Too Late for Love as well. When it comes to orchestrations and taking, your discography and finding some songs and basically, making them symphonic, we have been spoiled by Metallica's S&M, of course, with the great Michael Kamen. So I think most albums, when they go down that symphonic road, they're going to always be in comparison to something like that. And maybe that's not fair, but I think they did actually pretty good with this one here. Too Late for Love, though, really stood out as something that took what was good about the original and amplified it. Like, I've played in string orchestras before, so I know what that can, what that string sound can bring to something. And when the orchestra uplifts, like there were some songs on here where it felt like they just took the studio tracks and put a symphony in, right? But there were others where it's like, no. They took it, they reworked it, and they massaged it into something new. I almost had Have You Ever Needed Someone So Bad and Goodbye for Good This Time as potentials, but Too Late for Love just stole it right near the end and said, nope, this is the song for me. So off of Drastic Symphonies, what did you go with?
It's one of my favorite songs of all time, so I still had to go with Gods of War because I think it's one of the ones that lends itself to the symphonic elements better. There's a lot of instrumental breaks in Gods of War anyway, so it gave them more to play with there. Some of these songs, just exactly how you said, you can tell it almost felt like they just gave the symphony the backing track and was like, okay, mess around with it. And it's really minimalist and kind of doesn't even sound much different to me. But Too Late for Love, When Love and Hate Collide, and Gods of War were the three. It was a hard choice, but just because I like the song better, I think I went with Gods of War.
All right, you realize it's come time now. You knew what you signed up for this. So we've come to the point of the show where if there can only be one from the songs that you have on your list, what song is it? So I'll go first. I'll give you that moment to look at your list and agonize here. So off of On Through the Night, I went with Answer to the Master. From High and Dry, I went with Bringing on the Heartbreak. From Pyromania, I went with Too Late for Love. From Hysteria, I went with Hysteria. From Adrenalize, I picked White Lightning. From Retroactive, I went with From the Inside. Off of Slang, I went with Move With Me Slowly. From Euphoria, I went with Paper Sun. Off of X, I went with the acoustic version of Long, Long Way to Go. From Yeah, I went with Hanging on the Telephone. From Songs from the Sparkle Lounge, I went with Bad Actress. Off of their self-titled 2015 album, I went with Last Dance. Off of 2022's Diamond Star Halos, I went with Kick. And off of Drastic Symphonies, I went with Too Late for Love. Again, obviously because it's a good song. But if there can only be one, and I've been agonizing this one. I've been sitting here looking at my list going, maybe it's that one. Oh, that one's really good too. But at the end of the day, I think I have to go back to Hysteria. The song that knows not just one mood, but every mood. And the song that, honestly, it's a song that really anyone can sing. And I'm not saying that from a performance perspective, but I'm meaning no matter who you are and how you sing or what mood you feel, you can take this song and find a home in it. And that's a rarity for a song these days. For a song to be able to hit every mood, every taste, every genre, and fit right at home. For me, it's Hysteria. So now I've given you enough time, Lyle. So from your list, give us the rundown. And if there can only be one song from Def Leppard, what is it?
God, man, this is difficult. Like, this is truly a hard choice. On Through the Night, I had Rock Brigade. From High and Dry, I had Mirror Mirror. Oh man, Pyromania, Foolin'. I'm already second guessing myself in the head. From Hysteria, I went with Gods of War. Adrenalize, Tear It Down. Retroactive, Action. Slang, the title track, Slang. Euphoria, Promises. From X, I went with Four-Letter Word. Oh man, from Yeah, you don't even have to mention Yeah, honestly, because this is so difficult. Songs in the Sparkle Lounge, 9 Lives, from the self-titled Def Leppard, Dangerous. Diamond Star Halos, SOS Emergency. From Drastic Symphonies, Gods of War again. I am going to go with what I thought from the beginning would be my choice, because I said that this album should be held in higher regard anyway. No, you know what? I'm changing last minute. Bottom of the ninth. I'm going with Foolin' from Pyromania, because I think Foolin' is, if you are looking to get into Def Leppard and you want something that has everything about this band represented, before they got really famous, before they knew what was right, and when they were really just firing on all cylinders creatively and were making the stuff that would make them famous, you got to go with the thing that started the peak. And I think that's Foolin'. So I'm going to go with Foolin' from Pyromania. Obviously, it's on an album and in a time period where there's a lot coming out from this band, but I dare say that Foolin' is the best Def Leppard song.
You were contemplating 9 Lives, weren't you?
You don't know how close I was, but I feel really bad saying I've thought of 9 Lives from the beginning. At the start, I said to people that I told I was doing this episode, 9 Lives is winning. But I just don't think in all confidence I can put a song that so heavily features another artist as the best song from the other artist.
Interesting, because I mean, there are some artists where, like, if we were covering Peter Gabriel, I would seriously have to consider "Don't Give Up," which of course was his duet with Kate Bush. I don't know. Like, it's one of those things where do you lean on the song even though it's a duet?
I don't, and that's the thing. It's a duet, but at the same time, it's a duet so very late in a career that was like decade defining. Like, we've said it 100 times, but it's because it's so true. I think you have to pick something from their solo work to really, if you're only going to listen to one Def Leppard song, say you've never heard of Def Leppard, and someone comes up to me, I've never heard of Def Leppard, what is the best song for me to start with and listen to? I wouldn't say Nine Lives then. It's my personal favorite song, but what if you don't like country music? You know what I mean? So for me, in my heart of hearts, there's going to be a Nine Lives in there somewhere. But if someone's got a gun to my head, like I said, with picking a song from Hysteria, and they're like, give me the best Def Leppard song to listen to right now, Fool It. It comes out so naturally.
At least now we know what's the B-side on the 45 for you.
Yes, 100%.
Lyle, thank you so much. Before we go, please let our listeners know where they can find you and where they can hear you.
Everybody can find me on 640 Toronto. I'm one of the content producers there. If you're listening to the Today in TO podcast with Danny Stover, you hear my voice a lot. I'm also on the morning show with Greg Brady today in Toronto.
Lyle, dude, you know you're always welcome. This show, or It's Not That Bad, anytime, the seat is always ready for you. Thank you so much. And to you, our listeners, thank you so much for listening to this episode of There Can Only Be One. Hey, if you want to chime in, if you want to hear what songs that we are, an artist that we're talking about, find us on X at OnlyOneCast or on any other social media platform at Not That Badcast. You can also go to our website at notthatbadcast.com where you can catch up on all our back episodes and drop us a line and let us know if there's an artist that you would like us to cover. Until next time, Lyle, thank you so much. Listeners, thank you so much. This is There Can Only Be One. Take care.
Hey folks, Stefan Shirazi and Renee Richardson here from the Metallica Report.
And we are proud members of the Pantheon podcast family, where the best of music and podcasts unite.
We've got something pretty cool for you. We're giving away an exclusive Metallica merch package worth over $250.
That's a whole lot of Scary Guys, skulls, M72, and other sought-after Metallica swag. And we've made it easy for you to win. Follow and share the Metallica Report, and you're in the game. Go to pantheonpodcast.com/Metallica, enter your email, and hit that button to be entered to win.
And just like that, you're eligible for our monthly exclusive Metallica merch package.
And guess what, rockers? You can enter every month, so just do it. And while we love our global brothers and sisters, the lawyers won't let us ship outside the U.S.